let's talk about the trial. So you all remember from several chapters back, Harry and Meghan had wanted to take the Mail on Sunday to court because they said that the Mail on Sunday had erroneously painted Meghan as some kind of horrific diva, and also they had no right to publish excerpts of her father's letter, and it was a huge invasion of privacy, and she was shocked and appalled that it had ever happened, and blah, 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 blah. And her lawyer had written this ridiculously hyperbolic statement regarding how egregious the actions of the Mail on Sunday had been. But it was nothing substantial. There was nothing he could say other than a bunch of words, that they had maligned and mistreated Meghan and tried to paint her as some kind of terrible person and all of this. But there was never anything to substantiate these enormous claims. It was all just a lot of talk and jargon. So as we're going to see in this chapter, this is probably some of the cringiest stuff I've ever read. Meghan looks like an idiot. But rather than just back down and be like, okay, I totally miscalculated that. Let me see how I can spin this in my favor. Let me put out a positive story and just never talk about this again. No, instead she doubles down again and then a third time doubles down. And it's like, sister, let me sit you down and talk to you about when it's time to climb out of the ring, okay? You're beaten, bloodied, and broken. It's time to go. But no, she's like, I got another round in me. So Harry had said that the reason they had to go after the media was because the media had destroyed his mental health. And so vindication was his. He said, it was destroying my mental health, Harry told the British media. He blamed them for fleeing from London. I was like, this is toxic. So I did what any husband and father would do. I need to get my family out of here. Okay, well, Harry, here's the problem, though. Why then did you flee to the tabloid capital of the world, LA? You don't want paparazzi, but then you're like, we're going to go sit right down in the middle of Celebrity City and, just cross our fingers that nobody gets in our face with a camera. You're crazy. I'm not making a point that 10 billion people haven't already made, but if you really wanted privacy, you really didn't want any paparazzi in your face, well, then you need to maybe go back to Africa, which you said was your, one true love. I can guarantee you that there's not going to be a bunch of paparazzi following you all over Africa. And there you could have done some real good. And there you and your family could have lived in anonymity if you had really so chosen to do so. But you never wanted any of that. You just wanted to complain and be seen complaining. And why you would want that, I don't know. I just can't understand how he could never have projected that this lifestyle was going to be so unfulfilling. He knew from personal experience how fulfilling his stuff in Africa had been. And I don't really know what his charitable endeavors truly were in Africa. I know what he says they were. I know what he says he was involved in. I've never really heard anybody criticize his efforts in Africa, in the same way that they criticize what he was contributing to when he was in the military, or in the same way that he's been criticized for pretty much everything else he's done. When it comes to the stuff that he did in Africa, I've never heard anybody really go after him. He did post that dumb picture on Instagram where he was trying to look really brave with elephants, but his charities for kids with AIDS and, picking up where his mom left off and with various charities, seems that he was doing some kind of work. And even his own reporting on how he felt when he was in Africa doing that work just seems like, wouldn't you chase that feeling instead of chasing this Montecito lifestyle with your 14 bathrooms where you can poop in a different bathroom for 2 weeks straight and never find the same one again? Anyway, he felt like his privacy had been interfered with and that there had been no choice but to run to LA. No one will ever be able to explain to me their logic there. David Sherborne, who was at this point still her lawyer, but won't always be because he's going to fail her, he said in this statement that Meghan believed there was a pattern of intrusive and offensive articles in the Mail on Sunday. He went on to say, when power is enjoyed without responsibility, the trust we all place in this much-needed industry is degraded. He said that there were 9 articles proving the newspaper's dishonesty and malicious intent. And he said that they had a clear agenda against Meghan. He said that there were hundreds of thousands of inaccurate articles about her in the media that were distorted, false, and invasive beyond reason, far outside of all the things that had happened in the Mail on Sunday. It's just the whole media was against her, but the Mail on Sunday was specifically against her. The Sussexes were honorable people, this statement claimed, and that they were being completely pulled apart for no reason other than to earn profits. And they had never cooperated with any kind of paparazzi, according to this statement. And they had always refused to offer themselves up as currency for an economy of clickbait and distortion. And they told their staff never to speak to anybody in the press. So this whole idea of leaks was just an egregious lie. And they were going to hold the media's feet to the fire. And in their mind, there was no chance that they could ever lose. Well, of course, we can only imagine how Thomas Markle felt about this sitting over in Mexico, scrolling the internet. He had some feelings on this. He was outraged is what he was. It's because that People magazine had really distorted that letter and it had defamed him. I mean, if anybody had been defamed, it wasn't Meghan, it was him. He said it was a total lie. It misrepresented the tone and content of the letter that Meghan had written. He said the letter was not an attempt at reconciliation the way the People magazine article had represented it, and that she had never had any intention of making, headway in their relationship by sending that letter. Even worse, the People article had vilified him as a dishonest, exploitative, publicity-seeking, and cold-hearted. The problem, though, with that position was that in suing the Mail on Sunday, Meghan was attacking him, the honest father. I mean, that's how Thomas Markle felt about it. And he also said that he thought that this was going to be explosive in court because Meghan had been such a massive hypocrite. Her negative portrayal in the media was largely her own fault, according to Thomas Markle. And I agree with him. He said that she was always preaching about the environment, yet she was always on private jets. If people had a complaint there, it's because there was a legitimate complaint to be had. Also, her constant talk about, the core purpose of the Archwell mission is to uplift and unite communities, one act of compassion at a time. Yet her entire downtime is spent trying to go after her dad, trying to undermine anybody who's ever said anything negative to her. If she's so concerned about world peace and let it begin with me, well, then maybe stop being so aggressive and unkind to others. She just can't walk the walk. She preaches and preaches and preaches, and she's over here trying to give a homily to this person and sit this person down for a little come to Jesus. But never is she acting out on any of the things she says, and people are starting to notice. So Thomas Markle was just like, bring it on. I can't wait to go to court with her because her hypocrisy is so beyond the pale that she won't have a leg to stand on in court. Thomas Markle was particularly annoyed by Meghan's claim, written by David Sherborne, that the Mail on Sunday caused the rift between the two by deliberately seeking to dig or stir up issues between her and her father. Yeah, Mail on Sunday caused the rift. What are you talking about? You and your dad haven't been able to get along for ages, way back since you were in high school and you were mad at him because he didn't support you when you wanted to have a little fit. She claimed that the Mail had harassed, humiliated, manipulated, and exploited this vulnerable man into giving interviews. She went even further. Her signed statement, right? She has agreed to this. Her signed statement alleged that she was concerned that her father's narrative that she had abandoned him and had not even tried to contact him, which was false, would be repeated when in fact she had tried to call him and text him and had even written a letter to him to try and persuade him to stop dealing with the media. Well, none of that is true, and he can prove it. So Thomas Markle is just furious. He's outraged. He's beside himself with indignation because the fact that she's just coming out and saying this with a straight face, it's like, who does she think she is that she can get away with this? Thomas Markle acknowledged that there had been media harassment, but that was before the wedding. That it wasn't this letter that had come out and that had been batted about between the different media outlets, that the letter had nothing to do with the origin of their discontent with each other. They had been at odds with each other far before the wedding because Meghan wouldn't let him come see her. She was real cagey. She clearly didn't want him at the wedding. The whole thing with his suit sort of being made like haphazardly. I mean, it just was so clear that she was not openly inviting him to come. Then when he says he's having a heart attack, she's like, shut it, Dad, stop lying. The Mail on Sunday had nothing to do with the fact they couldn't get along. Meghan had been a nightmare way before this had ever happened. Markle believed that he was going to die before he was 80, and he felt like, chop, chop, we got to get things going because I want to say my piece before I'm dead. And he said that, he couldn't wait to get to court. He called it a high noon showdown, and he was going to have his say, and he couldn't wait to give evidence, and he was all ready to be cross-examined. He said, and this is where, he said some things before where it's like, okay, simmer down, old man. He says that it'll be quite stunning for everyone, he promised, and excruciatingly embarrassing for the royal family. His particular target was Harry for his insults before the wedding. Meghan, he said scathingly, had turned into Harry's mother. He's candy-assed. He's whipped. To his misfortune, and I have to agree with Tom Bauer here, he says that Thomas Markle's anger spilled into self-harm. Thomas Markle said, "It's time to look after Daddy," he told British TV. "Meghan owes me." It was time she repaid Daddy for all he had done. Okay, well, that looks like some trashy behavior. Your daughter doesn't need to pay you back for anything. I mean, I don't exactly think that's unconditional love. You gave to Meghan happily back in the day. And yes, her behavior as an adult is crushing and beyond reason. But to come out swinging and saying she owes Daddy, that sounds dysfunctional. Okay, well, there's a long, complicated route before anybody's going to get cross-examined, right? In the British court, there's going to be a judge who has several hearings, and they are going to talk about how the relevant law should be applied. In the very nature of the process and the prejudices, the judge's decisions were unpredictable. With the addition to this potent mix of a member of the royal family as the claimant, neither side could be certain what facts would influence the judge and what bias would determine his interpretation of the law. Both sides could only agree that Meghan's claim was a landmark case that would determine England's privacy laws for many years. The Markles, realizing that things weren't looking real good for them, decided that they better come out and show the world that they're really nice people who care about the starving homeless. Okay, so doesn't matter what anybody wants to tell you, okay? We're super nice people, okay? We're going to drive our Porsche and our Cadillac out to the starving masses and chuck some food out, you know? We care 10 minutes worth. So Tom Bauer writes that conscious about their image before the trial starting in London, Meghan and Harry's publicist authorized the distribution of photographs of the two handing out meals to the homeless in Los Angeles. Organized by Project Angel Food, founded by Marianne Williamson, the author of the self-help books and a friend of Oprah Winfrey, the couple stood in safety by the open doors of their black Porsche SUV and a Cadillac Escapade to distribute the packages. After a short spell of charity, they drove back to their Montecito haven. Just the fact that they even have so much organization going on behind the scenes of them going and doing charity work. You know, these photographs being distributed, the fact that they've got to get Oprah's friend to tell them which charity they should be involved in. It's like, just go down to the soup kitchen and serve some soup. You know what I mean? It's like, go down to your local church and pack some bags for the homeless and don't bring your cameras. Like, just do good things because it's the right thing to do. Not because somebody's going to know about it, not because you have a court case coming. You would have to work less hard if you just did the things you say that you are. Be who you say you are, and you won't have to have all these cover-ups all the time. Standing by the safety of her Porsche, she's over here handing out packages. Don't touch me. Ew, ew, ew. Don't get too close. You know, she's just disgusting. Now, the judge in this whole case was a guy named Mark Warby. Mark Warby was rated by newspapers to be very fair. He was experienced in media law, and when he had been a lawyer, had represented the Mail on Sunday and the News of the World in two separate cases in which the judge in both of those cases had appeared very biased. So having experienced trying to litigate a case with judges who were very clearly capricious and short-sighted, biased, completely willing to lean towards the claimant with the most power in the case. He knew what it was to be on the other side as a lawyer. And so having had that experience with judges who were kind of really sloppy with the evidence in front of them and just chose what seemed like the safest option, he wanted to do his best to be very fair to both parties here. I think it was a pretty good choice. It was a good thing that he was the judge here. To talk a little bit about his history, he had tried two cases. And the first case that he had tried, he had been representing the News of the World, and he'd been acting against Max Mosley. The head of Formula One motor racing had objected to the newspaper's expose of this sort of By the way, hide your kids for this one. This sadomasochistic orgy with 4 paid women, and they had been put in German military uniforms for this little shindig. And Mosley said that he wasn't doing anything that should have, incited public interest in it, because those women who were dressed in German military uniforms hadn't done anything that was overt overtones of Nazism, So really, it wasn't of any public interest that he'd wanted women dressed up as Nazis, because they weren't acting like Nazis during their little meeting of the minds. And what I have to say to that is, do the women need to be hailing Hitler while they're gyrating for it to be overtly Nazi? Like, how do you determine what is and is not overtly Nazi? I'd say the uniform's a good start on the overtones of questionable associations. But that's not how the judge saw it. And so people were like, well, that seems weird. That it seems pretty clear that he was trying to reenact some kind of disgusting fantasy. And because it involved Nazis, it seemed like that should be of public interest, but the judge said no, it should not. Then the other case that Warby had been involved in, where he had been ruled against, was the whole situation with Prince Charles' diary. Okay, in that time, he had been representing the Mail on Sunday. And Prince Charles had gone to Hong Kong, and I guess he'd had some kind of salacious diary about the experience, and it had been widely circulated. Everybody was reading it. Yet when the Mail on Sunday decided to publish excerpts from it, they were condemned, railed against, and lost in court about this whole thing. And some believe that the judgments in both cases exposed the judiciary's prejudice against the media. So again, having experienced what it was to lose when it seemed like you had an open and shut case, Warby could be expected to be a good judge, because he wouldn't want to be like those judges who had presided over the 2 cases in his past. Based on his advice as a barrister, the Mail on Sunday might have trusted Judge Warby to consider carefully its robust defense against Meghan's claim, namely that she constantly sought publicity and could have no reasonable expectation of privacy. First, because she had knowingly allowed her 5 friends to leak details of the letter to People magazine. Second, because Thomas Markle was entitled to expose the magazine's false claims that Meghan had been reaching out to repair the relationship. And third, because she wrote her letter in the expectation that it might be leaked to the media. So the fact that Meghan thought she even had a case when the evidence was so clearly against her was surprising to everybody. Yet she pressed on. In the 3 weeks into pre-trial hearings, the newspaper's hopes rose. Warby made 3 dramatic decisions about the evidence and about the claims that Meghan was coming at them with. So the first of these decisions was Meghan's claim that the Mail on Sunday had deliberately exploited her father be struck out of the case. So no more of that language. They weren't exploiting your dad. The second one, and similarly, Meghan's claim that the newspaper had harassed and humiliated her father and deliberately manipulated and exploited a vulnerable and fragile individual was ordered to be dropped. Again, what are you talking about? There was just a real lack of any credible evidence. The judge also rejected Meghan's claim that the Mail on Sunday had waged a dishonest campaign against her. He called her case wholly inadequate, impermissibly vague, and irrelevant. All of Sherborne's hyperbole was struck out. So Meghan was ordered to pay £67,888. As a sideswipe, the judge criticized Schillings, who had instructed Sherborne to help Omid Scobie to post pro-Meghan messages on Twitter. Like, the whole thing was just disgusting waste of everybody's time. Quit this middle school drama. Go back home, pay your money, be quiet. This should have been when Meghan climbed out of the ring and was like, oops, I made a giant mistake on that one. I shouldn't have done it. No. She keeps fighting, despite the fact that Mark Stevens, who was a media lawyer, came out and said, for Meghan, this judgment is like a train plowing into a petrol tanker at a level crossing. She's been humiliated. He advised that Meghan should just give up because she had no chance of winning a case that was focused on whether the public interest and freedom of expression overrode her rights to privacy and copyright. It's never going to happen, especially when she was so embroiled in so much of that negative commentary. If she had never had anything to do with this story in People magazine, if she had an airtight case and she'd never she had written a letter to her dad that was legitimately leaked and she hadn't tried to leak the letter, if she had not continually and constantly had proof against her that she was always working with Omid Scobie so that he could come out and, sort of be her spokesperson, there's just too many opportunities for her to be exposed. If she had never done any of that, she might have had a case. But she just was such a liar and she was such a manipulator. But it was so easy to see how she was a liar and manipulator. The fact that she ever thought that she was ever going to win. And the fact that she would be like, okay, well, that didn't work. Let me go in for numero dos. It's like, come on, girl. You got to just not. You got to know when you're losing. She does not know when she's losing. She doubles down. The defeat didn't do anything to set her back. It galvanized her. And that shoddy lawyer of her, Schillings. So Schillings and Meghan strove on. And they kicked David Sherborne to the curb. And then they got two expensive QCs, including Justin Rushbrook, who was Boris Johnson's great friend. This time, Meghan changed her strategy. All right. This is the news strategy. Instead of exclusively attacking the newspaper, she decided to turn her anger onto the palace and onto her palace advisors. She said, not only had they left her unprotected while pregnant, she now pleaded, but when faced by an onslaught of hundreds of thousands of inaccurate articles about her, Kensington Palace's spokesperson would only say no comment. To her fury, without any discussion, she was prohibited from defending herself, compelled to suffer in silence. Her closest friends, a special sisterhood, became deeply worried for her mental health, and to save her, they had spoken anonymously to People magazine. So this is the story now. Because she was suffering so egregiously with her mental health, because she was being muzzled by the palace, her friends had to come to her rescue. Else she would kill herself. I mean, these were the stakes, and it's just because her friends loved her. That's why they spoke to People. It wasn't because she was trying to, defend herself in any way. They just loved her so much because of the special sisterhood of the traveling pants. Well, this is getting her into some dicey waters because all of these unsubstantiated and problematic claims are not helping her seem like a stable person. She continues to change her story, and it just makes her look like she's, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. For the first time, Meghan admitted that two of those friends had been told about the letter. Oh, okay, so now we're getting a little honesty here. Okay, actually, some of my friends did know, but it's just because I was having such a mental health crisis, I had to tell them why I was so down, okay? They could hear it in my voice. And we're such a close sisterhood that, to lie and say nothing was going on, I mean, they could tell. They knew. So yes, I did tell them about my dad's letter. But it's because we're so close. They were going to get it out of me anyway. She still said that she didn't authorize any of them to speak publicly and claimed that she was unaware of the People's article until its publication. That is some BS. If you told your friend something in confidence and you were super against the media and the paparazzi and articles being written without your consent, and then your two friends hustle over to People magazine, it's not exactly an obscure publication, and decide to give their little take on your sad sack situation, I'm pretty sure that Meghan would have been mad about that. If she had not authorized them to do it and they did it anyway, they would no longer be her friends. If she really cared about her privacy. The Mail on Sunday expected to discover the truth once all Meghan's text and email messages to the five friends were disclosed. But Meghan condemned the Mail's attempt to discover the five friends' identity as playing a media game with real lives and vicious. She never complained to People magazine's editor about their inaccuracies. So it's just this weird game where she picks and chooses who she's going to go after. Yes, why didn't she go after People magazine? If they're over here publishing the words of her friends, they're over here playing a media game with real people's lives. Why didn't they, if she's so worried about the integrity of the media, why is she not going after People for saying, why didn't you deny this story? Why did you take this story to print? You didn't ask me about any of this. Nobody reached out to me. It's like if she's that worried about the integrity of the media, she should also be taking People to court. If this is really the hill she wants to die on, she should be taking everyone to court who's ever spoken about her without her authorization. Also, by the way, your friends interjected themselves into this media game when they decided to go talk to People, authorized or not. So you can't come to your friends' defenses now and say, stop playing with my friends' lives. These are real people. Your friends decided to play the game when they jumped on the court.